What's up, data transformers? This is Bolaji, and welcome to the Data Careers Show, the show where we watch analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists transform their careers. Today, we're talking to an actual actuarial statistician turned analytics engineering manager. Nice. I practiced saying that line 3 times. She builds data teams like a community. She models career growth after the software development lifecycle. This lady loves storytelling, high-performance inclusive teams, behavioral economics, Diet Coke, and pasta in all forms. Fun facts, she's never had a cup of coffee, and she averages 110 books per year. What?
Oh, no, you didn't!
How do you do that? I got to work on my script throwing. Please help me welcome the analytics engineering manager of RevOps and Hubspot, the data career whisperer, the Kasey Mazza. What's up, Kasey?
Hey, Bolaji. Thanks so much for having me.
This is a big treat. I'm a big fan of your work. I first discovered you on the Analytics Engineering podcast with Tristan Handy, and then I went back and realized that you actually spoke at Coalesce a couple of years in a row.
I love Coalesce. Have attended since the very first remote days, but just find the community to be so inspiring. And when the call for speakers came out, I think for 2 years in a row, felt just called to give back to the community in some way. So that's why I chose to speak and share kind of my perspective about the data world from the leadership side instead of the more technical side.
Of course, because this is what actuarial statisticians do. They talk about non-technical things. What in the world?
It's a little bit of a pivot from the path I had originally set out on in life.
I mean, this is fascinating. So I was just mentioning to Kasey right before we started recording that one of my kids is approaching that college age, and actuarial science is something he's expressed an interest in. And I'm like, how many actuarial scientists do I know? Well, now I know Kasey. And Warren Buffett. Not that we're on first name basis. Kasey and I are.
Yeah, it's a small but mighty crew. My college had a dedicated program to it, but even still, there were probably 10 to 12 of us who graduated from the program. So it's definitely a small crew. It's a very disciplined field, which is why I moved away from it pretty quickly after studying it in school. That's where I made the shift to analytics.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. Kasey, I love this blend of technical ability and emotional intelligence that you bring to our profession. I'm curious as to how you've been able to merge these two superpowers. But before we get there, I want to dig a little bit into your data origin story. When did you first fall in love with data?
Yeah, I don't remember when I fell in love with data because that was not the obsession that brought me to this path. My obsession was more with logic and patterns. So my brain processes information in a really structured way. I remember in high school and in college, I loved math classes. When you have a really hard problem, you could decompose it, find a logical formula or process, and then apply that to solve every other problem. Wow. So I used to love doing my math homework, as silly as it sounds. I loved having the right answer. I loved math, but I didn't really know what to do with that. And then when I was choosing my minor in college, my advisor suggested analytics, and she was like, you'll learn to code. And to go really old school, I remembered I loved coding my MySpace profile back in the day. So
snap! This is a throwback. Respect.
Throwback, but that's where it all started. So I signed up for those classes, and it turns out coding a MySpace profile and coding data are very, very different things. But it was
talk about unstructured, by the way. MySpace.
Yeah, the MySpace was not the structure I was seeking, but SQL and coding was. So it was that structured, logical way of solving problems. I finished my math degree, but my first job was analytics, and that's been the path ever since.
Just a quick story for relatability. I love what you're sharing here, Kasey. I have a memory. I loved math as a kid as well. Both of my kids happen to love math, and we're often in the minority, to be fair, people who actually enjoy math. I remember being in a math class in 10th grade, and our math teacher had given us this problem, and folks are pretty much like, I don't know. And I'm like scribbling furiously and, turning the paper and carrying the number. And the teacher is so exasperated. She's taken all her time to explain this thing for weeks. The class is deathly silent. And then I'm like, 8. And she's like, yes, that is correct. I have no recollection of what the math problem was, but that moment stuck with me. And I think for us, for people like us to find ourselves in a field where that weirdness, that nerdiness is actually, it's not just tolerated, it's actually celebrated, is a special thing.
Yeah, it certainly is. And that feeling of like right answer, something I get so much energy from, seems like you do too.
Talk about it. Yes.
Yeah. And that's where there's all these different tracks in data, and that seeking the right answer or an answer that can be validated is actually what kind of led me towards analytics engineering.
Wow.
I had tried my hand a little bit at data science. Data scientists are very brave. They're willing to run at a problem and then be like, no, it doesn't really work, or we can't really predict it. And there's no right answer, right? They're just about confidence and acceptance thresholds. To me, that was almost paralyzing, of never knowing if your answer was good enough.
Yes.
And that was where I was like, okay, analytics engineering is the path that is best for like my skill set and my motivation.
That's wild. You seized the opportunity to mentor a lot of people in a couple of areas, at least. Building data teams, building high functioning data teams, but even also helping data professionals to map out and plan their career path. You actually use the software development lifecycle as a model for planning your data career. Like, how does not compute? How do you do that?
It's all iterative. That's true for software. It's true for analytics engineering, and it's true for careers too. So the way I think about it is you plan and you execute and you test, and then you take a step back to say, is this working? Is this the best next thing? And then you figure out what your next step is. So every step in a career I see is just a stepping stone along a path, where the rest of the path is kind of open-ended. But every step you take, you're learning something, whether it's what you love or what you don't love. Both are equally important. And then you can continue to iterate from there.
It's all data, isn't it?
It sure is. All roads lead to data.
Like even the failures or perceived failures are all data. Both of my kids play soccer, and my older one plays at a pretty high level. He'd like to play in college, but he would struggle initially, especially being, he's math oriented and very analytical as well. He didn't like the failures. He didn't like to fail because, especially as a youth athlete, you're failing in public. You're failing in front of your parents and their friends and your friend. But I tried to emphasize that those failures are just data. They're letting him know what didn't work, so the next time he could tweak it a little bit, tweak his approach, and then see if that next approach works. It feels similar to what you're sharing here.
Yeah, exactly the same. It's all about figuring out what the next step is for you, and you have to know what you don't like as much as you do like in order to find that right next step.
I feel like you should give relationship advice
Not my
to data professionals. This is good. This is good. This is good. So just for clarity, we love to put everyone in the Harry Potter sorting hat process. So data analyst, data engineer, we know you're not a data scientist, not anymore, or analytics engineer. Which of those do you see yourself as?
Squarely analytics engineer.
Okay.
5-10 years ago, there was this hole in the market, and I was always classified as a data analyst in my roles, but I knew that wasn't the right fit. And even within a team of data analysts, my role always looked quite different than the other data analysts, because I was doing more of the data modeling and transformation. So data engineer was an option at that time. Data engineers to me have high resilience and attention to detail, and they're really good troubleshooters. That's not necessarily me either. So that was where I found myself in this analytics engineering space, which is more problem solving than troubleshooting. They're not too far off, but they are quite different. So I gravitated towards the problem solving and having stakeholders who ask novel questions. They require creativity to solve them. I really loved being able to bridge the gap between the technical and the business, make better decisions. And that's what I get energy from. So analytics engineering, even before I knew the word, that's always what I was drawn to.
Man, this is wild. So Kasey, something that shines through is your you seem to have a very high level of self-awareness. You seem to be very accepting of the things that you don't feel are your strengths, but that then allows you to really dial in on the things that you're not only strong at, but the things that you enjoy.
Yeah, that takes a lot of hyping myself up, I will say. That doesn't come naturally. But a lot of reminding yourself of like, you can't be great at everything. So find the things that you are great at and that you get energy from, and lean into those.
Come on now. I love that. I love that. Okay. So This is good. This is good. I feel like I should be paying you for this. This is like a therapy session. But let's talk about your day-to-day. What does it look like being an analytics engineering manager of RevOps at HubSpot?
Yeah. We've got a couple different analytics engineering leaders in RevOps, and I lead our customer success and our corporate reporting functions. So for me, the day-to-day could be a variety of different things. Those two areas, financial data, customer success data, can really run the gamut. But we're probably spending % of our time on new features, building things, innovating alongside our business partners. 30% of our time is reactive troubleshooting, responding to bugs, not only in our code, but in upstream systems when pipelines change. And then 20% of our time is all about maintenance and process and keeping the lights on for all of the different ecosystem or for the wider ecosystem that we support.
Yes, really helpful breakdown, Kasey. I'd love to get a bit more insight into your team setup. I think it was Coalesce 2022 when you talked about building data teams like a community. You emphasized, by the way, not building teams like a family. Why should we not seek to or aspire to build our teams like a family? I mean, loyalty, bonding, what could go wrong?
Yeah, families are great, but families are messy. I think everybody knows that. My family knows that. I love my family. Family is like my highest held value.
Gosh.
But that's not what we want to be bringing at work. We want to be able to challenge each other respectfully and disagree and not just have a blind loyalty to all move forward together. We want to create a space where people can really think outside the box. So yeah, that's my approach. I want the team to feel a place where everybody can belong. Maybe those familial values come through, but it shouldn't be a blind loyalty. It should be a place where people can challenge each other.
Ooh, you said a lot right there, Kasey. For people who, as data professionals, work on the data and sometimes have to deliver bad news or news that is not welcome, let's not even call it bad news because it's just data. You know, it doesn't care about your feelings one way or another. It's just hopefully factual data. That whole point about being able to not having blind loyalty feels like a really important thing to aspire to.
Yeah, for sure. It's following your curiosity and not just taking things as they are.
I love that. Follow your curiosity. I love that a lot. Okay, so what are some of the data roles that you have on your team?
Yeah, my team, everyone who reports to me is an analytics engineer or a manager of analytics engineers. We sit in a centralized data team. Within that team, we have data scientists, machine learning engineers, and a handful of analysts. We have brought together all of the analytics engineers at HubSpot into one team. And then within that central org, we're organized by function. So sales, marketing, customer success. That has worked really well for us. When you think back to building a team like a community, we brought all these folks together and we started to see the benefits of that very quickly of sharing learnings. We have like a lot of demos or internal science fairs where people can learn from each other.
Wow.
When I think back to 3 years ago, I didn't even know who the other analytics engineers were. But we've come a long way in the past 3 years.
But I love that. And I can see I can see the synergy. I can see you all learning from one another. What about the potential for siloing your abilities if you're not on the same team with your data engineers or your data scientists?
Yeah. So we are really close with the data scientists. We're organized by function. So there's a CS data science team and a CS analytics engineers team. We meet as a group once a week. We stay in really close step. And then I also attend the CS operations team, like ceremonies. So I attend their leadership team meetings. So the whole group stays in really close, tight alignment. So very fortunate that the business leaders and the operations leaders have always created space for the data team. We have such a great partnership because of it. So on that side, we're really strong. You talked about data engineers and ingestion, and that does sit separate from us. So that's in a completely different organization. They do orchestration, tooling, ingestions. We have a weekly interlock with them as well. So we're finding these ways to, even though we sit separately, to stay really tightly aligned.
Got it. Okay, intriguing. This is very helpful because HubSpot is one of those signature flagship brands that everybody knows, particularly if you work in tech. We've all admired the HubSpot brand for a while. It's fascinating to get a view as to how they're able to keep the engine running from a data standpoint on the back end. Kasey, could you talk through the tech stack?
Yeah, for sure. Tech stack for us is Snowflake dbt. We have a couple of other tools for data governance, for observability and alerting. Snowflake and dbt are kind of the bread and butter of particular analytics engineers. That's their day-to-day.
Wonderful.
And then our BI tool is Looker.
Perfect. Yeah, we use Looker as well here at dbt Labs. I'd be curious, Kasey, as to when dbt entered the chat for your analytics engineering career, considering the company is not that old.
I first heard about dbt from other HubSpotters at the very end of 2019. 2020 was when we started to make the shift. As if there wasn't enough going on. Let's change our tech stack.
Oh, that's right.
It was well-timed. And then in 2021, we had fully switched over. I think there's one remaining team that isn't fully on dbt, and they will be in the next 2 months. From there, that's a long time to make that transition, but most teams had switched over in 2021. So we were pretty early adopters of dbt, and we've always believed deeply in the mission of dbt. We adopted the title of analytics engineer after we started using dbt. It was transformational for HubSpot.
Amazing. Okay, so Kasey, this all sounds good. Our friends who are watching and listening are like, I want to be Kasey when I grow up. But we can't just do the highlights, okay? This is not Instagram. We got to see some of the lowlights as well, Kasey Mazza. So talk us through some data disasters, some hard technical problems that you have faced in the past and how you tackle them.
Yeah, you alluded to this earlier, but the siloed nature that we were operating in created a lot of really hard technical problems for us to solve. Really? We still see some of it. Interestingly enough, at HubSpot, some of the hardest data that we face is our own. Work with a third-party vendor, you have API documentation and SLAs, and you have teams that support it. Internally, HubSpot is a move fast and move faster type of culture. So our internal data that we get from our own systems is where we often have the least documentation. The data's great. We just can't always navigate it independently. So we spend a lot of time meeting with the engineers who build the systems.
Yes.
And again, I'm talking about internal systems, not the software that we sell.
Yeah.
And that's where we find we have almost like a translation issue where they say, we have all this data and we've dumped it somewhere. And we're like, okay, we're seeing it in Snowflake. And it's like, what is the gap between those two things? So that's a really hard problem we continue to face, but we've got great partners on the engineering team that we're meeting with constantly to work through some of this. So definitely the hardest thing for us is those pipelines and how are they set up and where do they come from when there's not much documentation.
That's so interesting, Kasey. I often like to ask folks how they handle communication gaps with non-technical stakeholders. This is the first time that I'm hearing of this issue where you actually need to communicate with folks that are quite technical, but there's still some information that's being lost in translation.
Yeah, they're technical in different ways. So they are deeply technical and talented, but we are speaking, Russian and German, and they're so different that we need a translator sometimes. And that's where our centralized data warehousing team can come in to play the gap.
Okay.
But yeah, technical in different ways. And I think, as you just kind of alluded to, speaking from technical to non-technical can be really challenging. Speaking from technical to technical when they're different technicals is a whole different ballgame.
A whole different ballgame indeed. People come to the data profession from such wildly different backgrounds. I feel like people's backgrounds can inform the work that they subsequently do. As you've pointed out, careers tend to be iterative, so you can bring things from a previous chapter and incorporate them into this chapter. But with your work that you've done around forming high-performing teams, I'd be interested in how one might shape the culture of a data team, almost like the Tower of Babel, right? To bring all these people speaking different languages and help them slowly get that synergy and speak the same language going forward.
Yeah, this is something we've been putting a ton of effort into. Not something that comes naturally. It's something you really have to be intentional and spend time on to create a shared language and a shared set of standards. That's what we've anchored to as our way of getting everybody on the same page. We did a ton of hiring in 2022 and 2023. and 2024. But when we have a data team where at one point, I think it was like 90% of the team was less than a year into HubSpot.
Oh.
So they didn't have a shared language or a shared approach, or we could not agree on leading or trailing commas for a very long time. There's a lot of things that we had to kind of figure out together, but creating
Yes.
that shared set of standards and guardrails, that set the cultural norms, in addition to setting up ceremonies or like Slack channels. We have a Slack channel that's AE demos where anyone can share something that they learned, create a quick video, demoing it, and share it with a wider group. I think those types of things really set the culture to say, like, we want everybody to learn together, and everybody should feel free to contribute and be encouraged to contribute. We've kind of set those structures in place to help create the culture.
This is good. This is rich. I want to speak to our data leaders just for a moment to expound on what you've shared here, Kasey. You tend to be the type of leader who invests time into personal development for your team. You had given an example in one of your Coalesce talks about how if you have a team member who's interested in learning Java, send them to go, learn Java, and then they can come back and bring that to work and become the Java expert. I get that. But you also gave the example, Kasey. I'm going to push you on this. If they want to go learn like how to make balloon animals or something, you would actually invest in sending them to that balloon animal class. Shout out to all the balloon animal teachers out there. And then bring that back. How does that help the team?
It may not be a direct hard skill, but there are some soft skills that they're learning along the way that are making the team better. And maybe someday down the road, we would have a team picnic where we would need a balloon animal artist. But I say that because I think that allows people to bring their full selves to work. Because if I had someone on my team who was a balloon animal expert and we were planning our culture event, we would probably lean into the picnic so they could showcase their talents, right? I want people to be able to be themselves and share their personal passions at work too.
Wow.
So that's where I love for people to follow their passions in general. They're always learning something along the way. Maybe they unlock something for someone else too, to find something that they're passionate about.
Man, that's pretty cool. It is always fascinating to me when I learn that next new interesting thing about a coworker. It's like, wow, you do that. One of my teammates, for example, her name is Amada. She runs all the DBT meetups.
We love Amada over here.
Amada is an incredible human being. She speaks 4 languages and she learned, I think, Hebrew it was over the past couple of years. She was actually encouraged by our team manager, coincidentally. That sort of thing fascinates me. Now I know that and I remember that. So if we're at Coalesce and I have someone whose first language is not English, I'm going to run down my Amada Rolodex like, all right, I'm going to tag you in, Amada. I need help on this. You actually talk about professionals not working toward titles, Kasey, but instead collecting, this ties into the balloon animal, collecting valuable skills like Pokemon cards. First of all, I love the example, but unpack that for us a little bit. Why should we not? Titles are cool, okay? Titles give us prestige. They give us status. You're saying not so fast.
Yeah. Titles matter. I want to be very clear. I think people should be titled appropriately and recognized for the work that they do and the level that they do.
Fair.
So I want to be very direct about that. But my advice is always to just be curious, up, down, and across. So get to know your stakeholders, the leaders you report into, the colleagues you sit beside, and follow the things that give you energy. Follow the things that you wake up in the morning excited to solve. Think about the things that end up on your to-do list, like, oh, I'm just going to carry that over for the next day. Like, those are the things to kind of pivot away from. And what are the things like your first thing in the morning looking forward to solving, or you get to the end of the day and you're in the middle of a problem and you're like, man, I don't want to step away from my computer. Those are the things you should lean into, because where you can combine your skill set with your passions, that's where the titles, the promotions, the recognition will follow, because you're doing something that you're truly excellent at and that you get a lot of energy from.
Speaking of a lot of energy, we're just going to pivot left. Because why not? 110 books a year, Kasey Mazza. Do you sleep? And you don't even drink coffee? What in the world? I need that story. What's going on there?
I love to read. I always loved to read when I was younger, and then kind of lost a love for reading in the high school and college years when reading became such a chore.
Oh, yeah.
And then it
yeah,
came
yeah.
back as an adult, which is really cool. But I love to read. I love to learn. I find that reading, I get so many creative ideas while reading. Just seeing how other people approach the world, always taking notes while I'm reading, and things are coming to me. A lot of my off-the-cuff thoughts come while reading, seeing the world through somebody else's eyes. So I love to read. Both fiction and nonfiction, I think, are equally important.
What genres do you like fiction-wise?
I love historical fiction. So I love to revisit a point in history or like a historical event through the eyes of somebody else. I tend to gravitate towards like the women that were just on the edges of history. So women spies in World War II that you don't hear much about, or Einstein's wife, just the people who are just outside. And it is fictionalized, but I find that that is the right balance for me of like engaging. I learn about something that really happened in the world, but there's still like an interesting story to follow.
I get it. Yeah. That's really cool. You can also tell a lot about someone by what they read or the type of shows they watch. So this is really interesting. I'll share a couple of recommendations with you. Have you heard of a show called Kindred?
No.
It's about a woman. She's an author in modern day, and she's writing this story about this historical period in time in America, and then she starts to travel back into that time. Fascinating premise. I like science fiction type premises, so I think there's an intersection in Kindred between historical fiction and science fiction.
I'm going to check it out.
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, Kasey, we talked about some data disasters. Thank you for indulging us there. But let's come back to happier times. Could you share a project that you're proud of?
Yeah, for sure. Like every other company in the world, we have a ton of data. The question is, what do we do with it? That's across the world, across every country. And we at HubSpot, we're throwing all of our data at our frontline reps and telling them to be more data driven.
Wow.
But that was overwhelming. There was a lot of noise. They were wasting a lot of time digging into conflicting signals. That's precious time that our frontline reps could be spending with our customers, and that's where we'd rather have them be. So midway through 2023, our operations and our data teams were tasked with building a single customer score to cut through all that noise.
Wow.
I remember sitting at Coalesce in San Diego on a call being like, how are we ever going to do this? We were really struggling to make sense of it all because there was so much data.
Right.
Our challenge was really, how do we make something simple enough that could be understood and actioned, but complex enough that it captured all the nuance of different types of customers and different customer goals. We landed on a layered score with a variety of subscores where reps could prioritize at a high level, but dive in, drill down for actionability. And the first time we presented this to our executive leadership team, again, I'm in San Diego, and our chief customer officer at the time said, this is as clear as mud. No. So it was a moment of panic, but it was also a moment of, we had a great cross-functional working group, and we all leaned in. So we launched in February of 2024, so just a couple months after that Coalesce. That was a pilot, and then did a full global rollout by June. So within 8 months, everybody at HubSpot was using this score.
Wow.
The score is dynamic and cool, and I'm proud of the score as a math nerd. It is cool. But more importantly, proud of the cross-functional partnership that we built. It was all hands on deck. Everybody feels a great sense of ownership over the final product. Still to this day, I'll be in the halls of the office or hear someone talk about this score, and I'll hear somebody say, I built that. And I'm like, yeah, you did. There was probably 15 of us who are like, yeah, I built that. So it's a really cool moment. But it kind of reaffirmed the proverb, if you want to go far, go together. So proud of that one.
Oh, that's such a good one. So now I want to know what my customer score is. It's like, there's a secret credit score at HubSpot. I need to know my number.
No, not at all. It's helping us to find the right customers who we think need our help, right? So
that makes sense.
Really cool.
That makes sense. I've been a marketer for over 15 years, and one of the hard-fought and hard-won lessons I learned was not everybody is the right fit customer. I mean, we all know that logically, but sometimes when companies are struggling to make their number for the quarter, make their quota, the standards start to lower. Like, I'll take anyone. And the problem is you might mess around and win those poor fit or mediocre fit customers. Now you have to service those customers. Now it becomes a customer support problem and it becomes a renewal/churn problem. So there's so much value in actually sticking to your guns at the very beginning and saying, no, these are the standards. This is what a good customer looks like. If they don't fit that, we will kindly divert them to someone else who could help them better.
Yeah. As someone who represents our customer success org and our main goal is retention, I appreciate the high quality leads.
Exactly. Man, that was such a great example. On the heels of that story, Kasey, how do you think about measuring the impact of your work on the business as a data professional?
Yeah. There are a couple like really straightforward classic metrics like time saved or dollars saved, but I actually think this is one of the hardest parts of the job for two reasons. One is that our impact is often second order. So we enable better decision making, but we don't generate any revenue. We sometimes save some dollars when we can make a query more efficient, but we never are generating revenue. And that makes it really hard for leadership to see the value.
Wow.
The other part is that when data is clean and accurate and quick, they just assume that's how it should work.
That's how it should be.
So they don't see all the work that goes into it because a data team should almost be invisible when it's successful.
It's like electricity.
Exactly. You just expect it to be there and you don't realize it's not there until you flip the switch and the lights don't turn on. So as for on our team, our impact is the business value that our stakeholders create with the data that we transform and model. I always tell them that our data is useless if it's perfectly modeled and it has great documentation, but it just sits in a warehouse unused. So that's another reason why, to your earlier question, our business partnership is so critical and why I think it's really critical for AEs to be experts of their domains. We need to spend a lot of time understanding what our data has unlocked or enabled for our team so we can tell the story with them of the impact we're having.
Wow, this is great. I played way too many video games as a kid, Kasey. And this is reminding me of some of those exploratory video games where you're walking around and you're trying to collect this tool and that tool. And it's almost like the data in this analogy is giving you the map to find the tool, but then you don't know what to do with that tool. You collect it, but then you don't do anything with it. Having the data alone, from what you're saying, is not enough. That data needs to be implemented and used to create business value.
Yeah, exactly. They have to get some insights from it and some wisdom. It's not just the data alone is not enough.
That's pretty cool. Kasey, you've been at this for a minute, not in terms of longevity of career, but you've done a lot in your short career thus far. How do you think about professional success?
Professional success for me at this point in my career is the success of my teams and the people that I manage. I care a lot that they are doing work that is interesting to them and that they feel fulfilled and challenged appropriately. That's where I feel the most successful. On a personal level, success for me is solving hard problems and doing things that have an impact. It's less about title, like we talked about, but more about doing work that's truly valuable and making a difference in the world. What drew me to HubSpot was the mission of helping millions of customers grow better, because most of those customers are small businesses that a little impact goes a long way.
Well, I love that, Kasey. I also really get motivated about working on difficult, challenging, interesting problems. I'm less motivated to do sort of like the routine troubleshooting, ad hoc requests. A lot of us might feel the same way. But it's interesting to hear how you've been thinking about professional success. This can tie back to your advice to collect skills along the way, like Pokemon cards, collect skills and then see where your curiosity leads you. To that end, Kasey, have you had any mentors that might have influenced your career early on?
Yeah, I had a manager a few years back who completely changed my brain, I will say, both personally and professionally. She was really logical and analytical, but she was also, probably more importantly, really kind and thoughtful.
Wow.
So she pushed me to be more curious, to ask more questions, to lead with empathy. Wow. It's been years since she was my manager, but I still find myself revisiting her leadership lessons and trying to mirror her approach, especially when it comes to problem solving. I'll put on my "what would Caitlin do" hat and try to put myself in her shoes. What I've observed over the years and what I learned from her is that so many times when we're facing hard problems, they're not really hard technical problems, but they're hard people problems.
Wow.
And that's why I emphasize the people side of the role so heavily.
Wow. Man, I let that breathe for a second, man. That's deep. Well, we appreciate what she poured into you, because you're obviously paying that forward, not only with your teams, but you're sharing what's working with so many of us as well. And so her lessons are having lots of reverberations in the industry. Where do you see yourself, Kasey Mazza, in 5 years? I know this means we're 550 more books into this book reading binge, but where do you see yourself career-wise in 5 years?
Imagine all the things we will know in 5 years.
Kasey's like a human AI. My goodness.
Imagine the state of AI in 5 years.
I prefer not to.
It's really hard to predict. I have just pivoted my business domain for the first time in almost 7 years. I've been strictly dedicated to customer success, and I've just expanded to our corporate reporting team as well. So I'm working on a few really meaty new problems for me, and they're going to take some time to untangle. I'm eager to solve them, and I'm really having a lot of fun doing it. There are some days where I miss the messy, tactical, solving complex problems with SQL, but I also really love building and leading teams. So right now I am taking my own advice of just following my energy and taking it day by day. 5 years feels hard to predict.
Yeah, that's true. That is fair. Do you have a favorite data movie?
Whoa. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a few, because this is a question that I asked in the DBT community just yesterday. So here's some of the favorites that have bubbled up. Let me know which ones of these you've seen. There's Hidden Figures from 2016, The Big Short, 2015, an unfortunate true story, Interstellar, Moneyball, Minority Report, A Beautiful Mind.
Moneyball was the first one that came to mind for me. There's lots of good ones. I have a great story about Moneyball, actually.
Oh, do tell.
My parents went to see Moneyball in theaters. When it came out, I think probably like 2011 or 2012. And they knew they wanted to go see a movie about baseball. They went to see Pitch Perfect. They saw Pitch and they thought it was the movie about baseball.
No.
Pitch Perfect is one of my dad's favorite movies.
Get out.
Moneyball has a space in my heart for that reason, but also that's the type of storytelling that I love, where you can blend the data and the business side of the world with like a true emotional, heartfelt story. That's something I love.
Love that. I've never been a baseball fan. Moneyball is one of my favorite movies. That's how compelling the storytelling was.
Yeah, there's a quote years ago. It was my Twitter bio for a while, and I don't use Twitter or X anymore, but I don't know if it's still there, but it was, stories are just data with a soul. And I think that's still true.
Yes. Stories are data with a soul. This feels like, I feel like I'm on the couch with Oprah right now. I should have like some chamomile tea. This is good, Kasey. All right, final question. We got to get you out of here, because you are saving the world with the work you're doing at HubSpot. What advice would you give, Kasey, to someone aspiring to find their own path in the data world?
Be curious. Don't chase the artificial things. Chase the things that give you energy, and the rest will follow. And get outside your comfort zone. Talk to people who jobs look different than you, and try to learn something new every day or every week.
Folks, we've been talking with Kasey Mazza, the Analytics Engineering Manager at HubSpot. She's the data career whisperer, the Oprah of data ops. I'm going to start calling her that. All the way from just outside of Boston, USA. Miss Kasey Mazza, this has been a great pleasure. I'm going to have this episode on repeat, because this was good. Kasey, I want some book recommendations as well, so I'm going to be hitting you up for that. But my goodness, thank you for hanging out. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was an honor.
Awesome. All right, folks, be sure to follow Kasey Mazza on LinkedIn. Look up her presentations on YouTube. She's done Coalesce. She's done podcasts. She's all over the place. She's going to become a household name in the next couple of years, I think, because she's really good at what she does. Thanks again, Kasey. Folks, we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
This show is brought to you by DBT. DBT is the industry standard for data transformation. It allows your team to prepare data for analysis in a way that's centralized, modular, and entirely open, all inside your cloud data platform. The outcome? Consistently dependable analytics for your organization. Now, the DBT community was built for and by data pros. Come hang out and transform with 70,000 of the brightest analytics engineers, data analysts, and data scientists in the world. With DBT, you transform your data. With the DBT community, you transform your data career.